Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, wherever you guys are. This is Biology 2, and this is Unit 1. So this is our introduction, just getting started to the human body and human anatomy. Most of this unit will just be terms or definitions of things, so that in the coming units, we kind of know what we're talking about. So the first thing that I want to cover is, what is a human? What does that mean in terms of abilities, creation, function, form, all those kinds of things? And the first thing that I want you guys to know is that we are created by God. He created us. Originally, Adam and Eve were the first humans, and he created them from the dust of the ground, and he breathed life into them. And we all have a living soul. Your soul is very different from your body. You essentially live in a body. It happens to be your body, and it is your container while you are here on earth. And that living soul is what has an eternal life. So you are a special creation. One of the things that the Bible says is that we are created in the image of God. We are the only creations who have that special recognition. We are different in many, many ways from animals, and the Bible very clearly states that humans are not animals. The scientific community does classify humans in the animal kingdom, and I want you to be aware that that is biblically not true, that you are definitely not an animal. Okay, so there are 4 human behaviors that I want to run through with you. Some of these they'll kind of mesh together in some ways, or they're not very clear differences for some of them. So, don't be too stressed out about it if you're like, I don't know the difference between this or this, or what fits into what category. Lots of them kind of overlap. So first off, human behaviors, we have instincts or innate behaviors. And this is something that you were born knowing how to do. Like, you are born knowing how to breathe. You know how to focus your eyes. Now, if you've ever seen a very small newborn baby, you know that they have a lot of trouble controlling their eye muscles, and their eyes are kind of doing their own thing. But they learn how to do that. Babies, even the newest, will move away from pain. And so these are things that you know how to do. Most newborns, if they are full term, are born knowing how to nurse, like the suckling instinct or motion, I guess I should have said, is what you're born knowing how to do. It's some of these develop with age, and some of them are more important initially than others, like knowing how to eat and those kinds of things. And this is where sometimes you really see a difference between a full-term baby and a premature baby. And sometimes those premature babies can have trouble, like with nursing or those kinds of things. And so there's can be very distinct levels of these instinctive behaviors. Learned behaviors are something that we have, or humans have, the ability to learn kind of over time. And very often the things kind of blur here, because innately we tend to copy others, especially when we are little. That's how you learned to talk. You copied. Hi, there was my cat. That's Lulu. You copied the sounds that your mom or dad or whoever you were around were making. You learned how to walk that way. Very often you saw them walk and you wanted to copy them. And the copying is instinctive, but through that copying, you learned some of these behaviors. And so we have the ability to be taught. You learn how to read. That is something that you wouldn't just be able to pick up necessarily. And so we can talk more about these, or you guys might do some questions about these as we go through. this unit. And so just, something to kind of think about the difference between the behaviors. All right, so then intelligent behavior, spiritual behavior. So intelligent behavior means that we have the ability to solve a problem, means that we have the ability to manipulate our environment. I forgot to say on the previous slide, those two, the innate and the learned behaviors, those apply to animals also. Intelligent behavior also can apply to animals. This just means that you are an organism that has the ability to see a problem or to see a situation and then know how to manipulate it, that you have the ability to reason, that you can say, okay, if I do this, then this will happen, and so kind of cause and effect. For example, an animal who is intelligent, she thinks she's more intelligent than she really is our cat, Lulu, who you just heard meow a second ago. She has figured out how to open the doors in our house, and probably you may have a cat who can do the same thing, but that meant that she had a problem. She wanted to be inside the room and the door was closed. And through watching us, through reasoning through, she realized that turning the handle on the door meant that the door would open. And so she could see the relationship between the objects, the handle and the door itself. And she realized if the handle moved down, then the door would open. And so again, you have this intelligent behavior, the ability to manipulate your environment. And it can be as simple as I'm chilly, so I will put on a coat. That's an intelligent behavior, all the way up to thinking, if I touch this hot stove, it will burn my hand. So all of those kinds of things. And so intelligence, can be math also, the ability to solve problems, to see the outcome, to be able to look ahead. All right, then the last one, spiritual behavior. Remember, we said just a few minutes ago that we are created in the image of God, which means that we have the ability to kind of to see abstract ideas. We have the ability to recognize that there is God, that we can have a relationship with Him, that we can acknowledge that there's a higher power, that we know Him. This also gives us the ability to recognize right from wrong. That gives us, this is kind of a bummer one, the awareness of self, which basically means being aware of death. And so this spiritual behavior is what sets us apart, and in particular that ability to have a relationship with God. And I do want to point out the recognize the right from wrong. Some of you probably have pets in your house, or a dog in particular. You can always tell when a dog has done something wrong, or if you speak to them in a tone that is a little sterner, they look sad. And so you probably say, oh, my dog knows right from wrong. Really what that is they have learned from intelligent behavior, they have learned cause and effect. Okay? They have learned that when Mom says something in a stern voice, I'm in trouble. And so I love my animal and I want to give them all kinds of credit too, but just, they don't have all of the abilities that people do have. Okay, so the types of anatomy. These are, this is kind of the science of this and how we will study things. So first off, gross anatomy, and this is large structures, the study of large structures that are visible to the eye. So if you don't need a microscope to see this, then it's essentially gross anatomy. We will do a lot of this, and in particular when we do our dissections, we will not put anything under a microscope. We will just see what we can see in those structures. Regional anatomy is when you're looking within a region and the structures within it. So if you were studying the head region, you would study the eyes and the brain, and the teeth, because they are in your head, your ears. So all of those things. So it's not that they're all within the same system, which we'll get to in a second, but they're just all in a close proximity. Systemic anatomy, number 3, is the gross anatomy study of the structures within a system. This is how we will kind of break up our units from here on out, because we will do the muscular system or the digestive system, and we will study all of those organs and how they work together and those kinds of things. So this one is not regional necessarily, because, for instance, your digestive system, goes from your head all the way down to your anus, essentially, and that covers a big region. And so you are just looking at the particulars within that system. Surface anatomy is another gross anatomy study, and this is the internal organs as they relate to the skin. So this one, like how the muscles, if the muscles contract, what does that mean externally, as far as appearance or those kinds of things. It's kind of, I should probably look up more on that one just so I'm clear on what it is, but it is very much what internally happens to affect external. Okay? The microscopic anatomy, this is the study of cells within a larger organism or organ. And we'll do some of this. That's called histology, if you're looking at the cells within a system. So like we'll look at bone cells and the different types of muscle tissue cells. And so this is one of the things that you would tend to see more, like if you go to med school, but you want to be an internist, or you want to work in a hospital lab, and this is where they take the samples and the tissue samples and blood samples and all those kinds of things, and study those to make a diagnosis for a certain patient. Then this last one, developmental anatomy, this is how the structures change as the organism ages. And so we will touch on this one, but it is not going to be our main way of studying these different systems. But it is one of the one of kind of the cooler ones as you do go through anatomy and just kind of seeing the changes. And surprisingly, they're not a lot, but to me it seems like some of the ones that happen are kind of surprising. Okay, so now the structural organization. So just really quickly, the levels of organization within any organism, essentially. I mean, obviously we're human anatomy, so you got a guy here drinking his coffee. But first off, we and all other forms of matter are made of atoms. In some cases, those atoms organize themselves into molecules, which are combinations of 2 or more atoms in a set ratio. And then you get to our stuff, kind of what we'll start with, and they're the cells. And the cells are the smallest living units of any organism. Remember, you're made up of, I hope I'm not wrong on this, somewhere, like 30 trillion cells. And so they are all individual living units, and then they make you up, and their work is what keeps your body alive. Then those cells are grouped into tissues. The tissues are grouped into organs. The organs are grouped into organ systems, which would go back to the systemic anatomy we just talked about. And then you put all of the organ systems together and you get an organism. That level is something, or those levels are something that you can, as a biologist, study. You can study cell biology. You can be very specific on some of these as far as what part of a living organism you want to study. We again will be studying mostly the big picture, mostly the organ system or organisms themselves. Okay, so now some tissues. Now this is a picture or something similar to what you will see in the book, like the one that has the yellow or the orange spine, so the Biology B book. And there are 4 types of tissues, and they all make up different types of structures within the body. So first off, you have connective tissue, and this is blood or bone, blood, there should be a comma there, bone, comma, blood, the lymph, and then tendons or fat. Connective tissue basically are all over the body. in different areas, and they're not stuck in one place. Some of them move around, obviously, like the blood or the lymph tend to move, and that movement in some cases is, I think, probably the best reason for the name connective tissue. Then you have epithelial. This tissue covers the external surface, so your skin is also called your epithelium, and then it also lines certain organs. Your stomach is lined with epithelial tissue. It also lines your blood vessels. It can help in those organs to secrete things like digestive enzymes. It can also help keep the surface of the vessels smooth, so like your blood flows smoothly. So that is kind of inside and out. This is when we will look at different tissues and try and see like the difference between like the epithelial tissue on your skin, like what you see, versus what you would see lining your stomach, and kind of the difference in shape, and which means a difference in function. Muscle tissues, the big thing with these is that they can contract. They are tissues that have the ability to change their shape, basically, which means they can go from being relaxed and stretched to contracting and really condensing themselves. All right, then nervous tissue. These are tissues that have the ability to receive and transmit information or impulses electrochemically from other cells, from muscles, or from glands. So they basically are the information carriers within the body. These are the tissues that help you know what to do. Some of them are, well, almost all of them, you don't really think about any of it. They are instantaneous as far as their impulses go. These tissues can be vascular, which means they contain blood vessels. They need blood to stay alive and to carry nutrients. And so like your muscle cells, obviously they're well vasculated. They are well supplied with blood. Avascular means that they do not have blood vessels. And these are the ones they have enough to stay alive. That's kind of a false way, I guess, to define that. They have some connection to blood vessels because they do have to be living. But things like tendons, for example, are considered avascular. They don't have a lot of contact with blood vessels, which is one of the reasons that tendons are so slow to heal. They can't get enough nutrients quickly enough to heal quickly, but they will heal over time because they do have some contact with blood vessels. Okay, now moving on, still kind of with the anatomy stuff, body cavities. So you have two main body cavities, and each one of those are split into smaller cavities. So first off, you have the dorsal cavity. And so on my picture over there, and just know this will be a little bit different than the one I give you to put in your notebooks, but same basic information, like the colors are different. The dorsal cavity is along the back of the body. So dorsal, if you think about like the dorsal fin on a shark, the one that sticks up out of the water, might help you remember that. But in my picture on this screen right now, it is that orange color. And it is then made up of the two smaller cavities, the cranial cavity, which encloses the brain, and the skull is the main form of that cranial cavity. It's there to protect your brain. And then you have the vertebral cavity, which encloses your spinal cord. And when we get to these structures, when we do the skeletal system, you'll see that, the actual holes that are in the vertebrae and where the spinal cord actually runs, but they are protective because of their hard bone structure, what they're made of. Then the other cavity is the ventral cavity, so it's along the front of the body. And on my picture here, it's like the purple and the pink and the green. And so you have two cavities here, also two smaller cavities, the thoracic cavity. And this contains your heart and your lungs and your esophagus. These Organs within this cavity are also very well protected by your ribs and your sternum in the front, and then the ribs and your spinal cord in the back. That's because these are essential organs. You need your heart to keep beating, and you need your lungs to keep working in order to stay alive. Your esophagus is the part of your digestive system, the tube that basically gets your food down into your stomach, so kind of a big deal also. And so these are still very protected, just like the things that are in the dorsal cavity. And then the last cavity is the abdominopelvic cavity. This is like your stomach, and this is open essentially. There are no bones surrounding it, unless you count like your spine on your lower back. These are important organs, but these are not the organs that you really need to stay alive. And so that's part of the lack of protection for some of them. So there's no hard bone structure around the majority of these organs, but they contain your digestive organs, your reproductive organs, which actually are a little more protected down by your hips, and then excretory organs, intestines, rectum, all those kinds of things. And so you have these two main cavities, the dorsal and the ventral, so back and front, and then their little subcavities. And again, this kind of goes back to the regional anatomy, and just as a way to say where something is. You would say, okay, well, it's in the thoracic cavity. Okay, so the body systems are basically how we will study this year. The units that we will cover will mostly be by body system. In some cases, we'll do kind of a little subsystem when we talk about the particular tissues in those systems. So we'll start with the integumentary system, which is your skin, and its function is to hold you together, to protect you from your environment, and also to help you regulate your body temperature. It's how you sweat, essentially. The skeletal system is what gives you your structure. It gives you your frame. It also is helpful in moving. Your muscles, which we'll get to in a minute, your muscles have to have something to push and pull against, and so that is part of what your skeleton does. Then the muscular system is, of course, the only system that really has tissues that can contract, which makes it your movement system, essentially. Internally, like moving food from place to place, or externally, like walking. Your respiratory system is mainly, as we think about it, made up of your lungs. That's how oxygen gets into the body and CO2 gets out. We'll kind of put that together in some ways with the circulatory system, and so I'll get to that one in a minute. But then you have digestive system, and this is how you get nutrients into your bloodstream after they're digested in your stomach and moved through your intestines. So this is supplying the nutrients that will help your body produce energy. Then the circulatory system. So a lot of times, I think actually when we talk about it, we call it the cardiovascular system. So your heart is a big part of this one, obviously. Your heart is a pump that is continuously pushing blood through your body. The blood itself is the carrier for the oxygen that our respiratory system gets in. It carries the nutrients from your digestive system, and then it also carries the waste from those two systems back. The CO2 is waste that your respiratory system takes care of. The food waste that your cells produce, your circulatory system then carries into your excretory system or back into your intestines. Your lymphatic system is part of is usually grouped with your immune system. It works as a way to keep stuff that shouldn't be in your body out. So it helps with bacteria and viruses. It helps with the healing of injuries and all those kinds of things. And you guys we've talked about, I think we talked about in biology, like your lymph nodes, the ones we're most familiar probably with, the ones like up in our, like behind our jaw, and just those, Your lymph system is actually, if you see a picture of it, looks very similar to the cardiovascular system with vessels and those kinds of things, because it's all over your body. All right, the excretory system is how you excrete waste, how you get that out of your body. So it contains your kidneys, which are the filters, your bladder, which is the storage, and so it's basically getting waste out. The nervous system is the control system. So it is the one that tells your body what to do. Whether you think of it consciously or subconsciously, your brain is doing everything. The endocrine system is, we'll relate that most closely to like hormones and different chemical signals in your body that help to regulate body functions, that help to control like growth patterns, like the hormones that we associate with puberty and those kinds of things. And then finally, the reproductive system. So this, in males, this is the testes, and females, this is the ovaries as far as the main organs in there. But this is how you would reproduce and have a baby. Okay, and now last but not least, some anatomical terms. So this goes back a little bit to just the anatomy itself. When you're describing where something is, you very often describe it in terms of relationship to this. Some more than others. So anyway, we've got anterior. Sometimes we will say ventral, like the ventral body cavity that we just talked about. Anterior refers to the front of the body. Posterior or dorsal refers to the back. You'll hear sometimes people say they're posterior, like is their rear end. That's where that comes from. Superior, your head. So if it is something towards your head, it is superior to. So for example, your shoulders are superior to your hips. And so you have kind of a relationship there. It's telling you this compared to this. Inferior is towards your feet. Your knees are inferior to your hips. Let's see, superficial is closer to the surface. Your muscles are superficial to your bones, in most cases, like your limb muscles. Deep means that it is farther inside. Proximal means that it is closer to the body trunk. And so, so if you are saying, I'm trying to think of a good example. Sorry, this is not best. Oh, so if you look at the girl as she is standing here, the male and female on the picture are standing in anatomical position, by the way, and notice on the girl that her palms are facing towards us. And so you would say that her pinky finger is proximal to her thumb because it is closer to her body. Distal is the opposite. A thumb is distal to the pinky. Lateral refers to the midline, and the midline is just like it sounds. It's labeled on the girl there, just that white dotted line down her middle. So you can say if something is lateral, it means it's farther away from the midline. So your arms are lateral to your shoulders, so they're farther away, or your elbow is lateral to your shoulder. Medial means it's closer to that midline. And then you have some kind of divisions. Transverse is a line that divides the body into superior and inferior parts. And so I could, anywhere I drew a line, if I drew a line here on this guy, that's transverse, because this would be the superior and then this would be the inferior side. And I could draw it closer to his waist. I could draw it down, by his feet, and then everything above the line would be superior, and everything below would be the inferior. Sagittal is going to, let me erase this so it's not so confusing. Sagittal divides things into left and right parts, so it's similar to the midline. So it is a line that would go right down, and I know it's not going to be super straight when I draw it, but it is a line that would just go right down between the eyes and straight all the way down. And so you've got left and right sides on the sagittal division. Okay, so that is everything for Unit 1. So whether you are watching this video because you are home right now with quarantine or something else, this is the information that we will cover in class. So make sure that you get this, watch this video however often you need to, and always be sure that you ask me questions if you don't understand. You know how to get in touch with me. And for those of you who saw it in person and want to use this for a review, obviously you have because you've watched this video. It's just, it's one of those things. It's something good to keep going back over. So I hope you learned a little bit. I hope that I get to see you all in person, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.